Welcome ladies and gents to the first in a two-part series looking into and speculating upon the future setting, characters and story of the upcoming game Payday 3. In this video specifically, we're going to be looking into the characters of Payday 2 and working out who's likely to reprise their roles, or at least play a part in the narrative of the game. Hopefully I can offer a unique perspective by judging each character's potential to return from a practicality and fan demand standpoint, as well as accounting for narrative reasoning after all the time I've spent working on the story of Payday videos. The characters are core to Payday's story, and without knowing who's going to be around for it, it's tough to speculate on what's going to happen in the next game. For the most part, I'll be drawing evidence from all in-game and out-of-game sources. However, as I've repeatedly said, the rumours and stories section of the credits are predominantly fan service narratives and likely won't have much bearing on the future story. Things like Dallas's yacht, Duke's museum and Clover's castle are canon though, so keep that in mind. Anyway, as ever, don't forget to leave a comment with your own thoughts down below, as well as who you'd like to see back in Payday 3's 2023 release, or across its life cycle. Remember, Payday 2 launched with only 4 characters, so don't be too disappointed if Payday 3 aims to build from that same base, but it sure doesn't hurt to hope for more. Now before delving into each character individually, I want to answer an obvious question. There may be some of you who are thinking, how do you even know we're getting any returning characters? What if Payday 3 is simply a new game in the franchise with a totally original crew? Well, that's not impossible. I've heard some great suggestions for that sort of setup, but I do think it's immensely unlikely. There is genuine brand recognition for the old Heisters as of Payday 2, which Starbreeze and Overkill would be crazy to throw away. However, the move from Payday the Heist to Payday 2 serves as a lesson. It's the masks that people see. Between those two games, one voice actor was replaced and a second considered for replacement, whilst Hoxton's character was completely retconned. Most of you will know that the game launched with Houston as one of the original 4, but prior to this being contextualized in the Hoxton breakout heist, Overkill had tried to sweep this under the rug a little and likely made the replacement to fit in with their new live-action web series. In fact, that heist's existence was itself a response to fan pressure to bring back the original British Hoxton. The point I'm making is that the marketing potential is in the mask and the suit. There's nothing to say that just because a mask is back, its original wearer will be. But before I worry you too much, we do already know Dallas's mask is going to be in the game, as seen in the first promotional image for Payday 3, and I'd be surprised if it wasn't the original Dallas who's got this mask in his hands. I'm not counting out other possibilities, and one of my favourite theories is that this game is going to be about the next generation of heisters in the Payday cycle, with previous gang members reappearing as contractors. But even in that case, Dallas will still be a returning character. So assuming we are looking at the original members of the Payday gang in this image, and these are at least 4 of the release roster, we can get some idea for who's going to make it in immediately. My Payday 3 announcement video dug further into this, but we seem to be looking at Dallas, Chains, Hoxton, and potentially Houston. First up, Dallas. Of course, I think he's the man holding on to that mask. His visual likeness and live-action actor Eric Etabari makes frequent Payday-related tweets and is clearly still close to the team at Starbreeze. Likewise, Damien Poitier, the actor who voices and gives Chains his likeness, is equally involved and has made statements in the past which would indicate he knows more about the development of Payday 3 than he is able to let on. These guys are perfect in their roles, and as founding members of the gang, it'd make perfect sense for them to return. Overall, I've given Dallas a 99% chance of returning, and Chains a similarly high 95% chance, given he's not quite the face of Payday, but is almost just as iconic. Up next, we have Hoxton, another character who appears to be silhouetted in this teaser. Again, he's a founding member of the gang who only grew in popularity after being left out of Payday 2's release. Both Pete Gold and Josh Len, who together make up his voice and likeness, are heavily involved in Payday-related discussion and have showed a continued willingness to work with the character and franchise. I doubt Overkill will make the same mistake again, and seeing as Hoxton's importance to the story and connections to other characters expanded over Payday 2's life cycle, bringing him back could give some insight into heisters such as Bonnie and Clover, as well as characters like Oldstone, without them necessarily having to return. He's always struck me as the character least likely to leave the heisting game even after the events of the White House. It's sort of in his DNA, and a return to crime would fit his character perfectly. Just like Chains, I believe he's almost a certainty return and give him a 95% chance of doing so. Finally, from the teaser image, we have who I believe is Derek Ray's portrayal of Hoxton, but I've seen many argue otherwise. Hoxton is an interesting character seeing as he bears one of the iconic 4 masks, but wasn't actually a Heister from the first game. In any case, he's built up a cult following and amusing rapport with his rival Hoxton, which makes him feel like one of the true original Heisters. While Derek isn't as involved with Starbreeze as the other major character actors, he still played a large part in the live-action series and has remained present throughout the game's lifecycle. However, one concern I do have is that he seems to have a stand-in actor during the final true ending of the game, somewhat limiting my confidence in his return. But from a story perspective, being related to Dallas and hating being left in his shadow, it would certainly make sense for him to return to the world of crime when his brother does. I can't see Overkill missing the chance to reprise his and Hoxton's rivalry either. He'll be back in some capacity. I give him an 85% chance of playing a major role in the new game. Of course, we have an elephant in the room here, or more accurately, a wolf. The Swede is another fan favourite with a personality just as iconic as his mask. I'd be surprised if we don't see all 4 original masks make an appearance in some fashion. However, by all accounts, Wolff is a character that's been phased out over Payday 2's lifecycle ever since Ulf Andersson left the team. It's exceptionally unlikely Ulf will return, given his other commitments to 10 Chambers and GTFO, and if Overkill had wanted to recast him, there was plenty of opportunity over those ensuing years to do so. It's not as if they should have a hard time finding a Swede to fit the voice acting criteria. I've always wondered if there was something contractual stopping them from replacing him, or if it was just respect to his original portrayal. So in my mind, Wolff's return does seem to be in doubt, but I'd be amazed if someone doesn't at least take up his mantle and mask. In terms of the original character returning, likely portrayed by another actor, I'd give him roughly a 50% chance. I'm honestly split down the middle on this one occurring. Outside of the core 4 or 5 after Hoxton's re-edition, I think it's easiest to point out which characters are unlikely to return, at least from a playable perspective. First up, the easy ones, the crossover characters. These guys are understandably less likely to return, as they were added as part of either a promotional campaign or simply to give the Payday crew a broader appeal to fans of the wider crime genre. Scarface is a great example of this. The guy's already just about hanging in there in Payday 2, seeing as he's no longer purchasable in-game. It's very unlikely any deal will be revived for his return in the next game. Although he was a good addition to Payday 2, I don't think Tony needs to return and completed his role nicely in the second game. I'd give him only a 5% chance of returning outside of character references. Sadly, that means my boy Jimmy is also a big doubt. The relevance of Hardcore Henry has diminished with time, and it would be shocking to see him back in a playable or voice capacity, especially as his VA, Shelto Copley, likely doesn't come cheap. He does, however, have a huge following in Payday 2, and at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if more people thought he was a Payday original than knew of his movie origins. In any case, a return seems doubtful, and although he is my favourite character, he exists as more of a gimmick character and is heavily carried by Shelto's incredible delivery of lines. Either way, he's more likely to come back than Scarface, but still a massive doubt. I'd give him a 15% chance of return. Bodhi is in a similar situation to Jimmy, but without the strong inherent connection to the Payday franchise. He felt like a celebrity heister who never really played a role in the story outside of Locke's addition to the team. Point Break is not overly relevant at the moment, and although his voice actor Josh Len may be around, I don't see him being called back as Bodhi anytime soon. I suspect he'll be a briefly referenced character with little to no chance of returning. 10% in my opinion. As for the other two out-of-universe characters, their enduring popularity, alongside Starbreeze's sustained relationships with Lionsgate and Denison Games, means it's hard to count out some sort of appearance from Wick and possibly even Jacket. A return for Wick with a Keanu portrayal would be a huge move for Starbreeze, especially seeing as he's dipping his toes into video game acting with the likes of Cyberpunk. We've seen them hire Hollywood acting talent before, so don't count it out. Also, it's well established that the Continental and Wick universe exists within Payday's own. It would make sense for Wick to seek refuge back in his old gang come 2023. Doubtful, but still very possible. I'd give this a 35% chance of happening. Jacket's existence, on the other hand, makes very little sense from a cross-universe narrative. Even in Payday 2, his presence is hard to explain, unless you read into the theory that he's simply a sociopathic fan emulating his favourite video game character. If we get past that, a reappearance could be feasible. The character is just as iconic within Payday 2 at this point as he is for Hotline Miami, and Dennerton is a Swedish company close to Overkill's home. Of course, his character would never get away from violence and crime, so it would make sense returning to the gang, and I truly don't think Dennerton would be against it. This one's up in the air, and I give it a 40% chance of coming to fruition. At the very least, you can be sure there will be Hotline references within Payday 3, there always are. Oh, and of course, I almost forgot, Ethan and Healer are 100% gone. Irrespective of how they were received and their lack of narrative relevance to the story, this was a one-off addition for a charity, so don't expect them back in Payday 3 in any capacity. I give this one a flat-out 0% chance of occurring. Moving on to the Payday original characters, let's start off with the old boys. You see, one thing I haven't mentioned yet is the age of returning characters. We know the final events of Payday 2 took place in 2018, which would suggest the Payday franchise follows a linear timeline directly proportional to that of the real world. This is never a great idea when trying to build a long-running franchise, but with it in mind, Dallas will theoretically be 54 when the game comes out, not a spring chicken anymore, but plausible. However, if we assume the characters' given ages are how old they were when they joined the gang in Payday 2, Jiro will be 60 and Rust 68. Now, I'm not saying that's impossible, but Overkill will have to consider what they are doing with this aging cast. In my opinion, Jiro, although being a fan favourite who has actually been one of the few characters to show development across the game, will not be returning in Payday 3. I don't believe this is an issue with his actor Togo Ogawa, who seems to have really loved playing the role. I simply think that Jiro was a character with a genuine arc in Payday 2, framed by the Search for Kento campaign, the revelation of his own son's brainwashing by the Kataru, and eventual resolve to stick with his new family in the Payday gang and see Kento killed. This was an emotional rollercoaster for his character, which I think has been completed, and believe the idea of him wandering countries and living out his days in peace after a lifetime of crime he didn't necessarily ask for is a perfect way to resolve his character. Since he did play a major story role and was so unique and popular, it's not unbelievable to see him returning, but I think his story was basically told in Payday 2, so give him only a 20% chance of making it back. Rust is in a similar situation, but without all the heartfelt story. I get the feeling that Ron Perlman has no interest in reprising his role, and especially from a voice acting perspective, Rust wasn't a well-loved character. Honestly, his addition always felt more promotional than substantially relevant to the story, and given his character's age by 2023, it would seem his best heisting days are behind him. It makes sense to me that he rode off into the sunset after his involvement in the City of Gold campaign, and I give him a 10% chance of returning. Sangalez feels like he falls into a similar category to Rust. His release always felt like one of the least hyped up in the game's history, and whilst his character was unique and well liked, he was never really given anything to do. Even when he was somewhat given a starring role in the Silk Road campaign, this was more from an aesthetic standpoint, with no additional character dialogue added for him. He's one I could see making a cameo at some point in the future, but for release seems to be very much so in doubt. In fact, him going to settle the score with Jiro in Japan is one of the few fanfiction endings in the credits I can actually get behind. It's unlikely he'll be returning at launch. I'd give him roughly a 25% chance of doing so. Joy is another one of those characters added towards the end of the game's main story cycle who played a brief part in Proceedings. Her name and mask are predominantly in reference to the Joy-Cons on the Nintendo Switch console she was initially launched exclusively on, so I doubt Overkill were ever planning something elaborate for her in future games. Although I do like the role she plays within the gang and believe she's much more likely to come back as a contractor or intelligence sort of figure guiding missions than she is as a heister. Also, her link to the contractor Locke gives her somewhat of an advantage, as I'm almost positive Locke will be returning, but more on him in the contractor section. Overall, I'd give Joy a 35% chance of making it back in Payday 3. The final "what was your purpose" character is Bonnie. I actually really like her and think Rona Cameron did a great job with her voice and conveyance of personality. But she never did much and wasn't widely loved by fans. Rona didn't seem to have very much to do with the character after launch, and so isn't really associated with the game either. In my opinion, she's very unlikely to be a returning character, and there's nothing in the story which would suggest otherwise. I do believe we'll have a female Heister added at or close to launch, but I don't think it'll be Bonnie. 20% chance at best. On to the other end of the spectrum for late arrivals, we have Duke. This character ended up playing a larger role in the final chapters of the story than basically any other member of the gang. He was added as a proxy for us, the players, to basically input all the ARG solving we were completing into the game. It's thanks to Duke we learned of the Kataru and the madness of the old gods, Nephilim and kings. He was obviously an essential character in the Payday storyline, but here's where I'm incredibly split moving forwards. If Overkill want to proceed with the Kataru storyline and have a successor to the dentist, or have Vlad and the elephant take centre stage, it would make sense for Duke to be in the game and act as their foil for the more mythological elements. However, if Overkill decide the supernatural ended with the death of the dentist, and they want to go for a more grounded criminal experience, then Duke would probably feel out of place. The way I see it, people probably want something that's more grounded in reality after Payday 2, but would be surprised if the underlying supernatural elements of the world were not teased in the background. Without a doubt, there will be something like The Secret in Payday 3. So that makes calling Duke's return to the crew almost impossible. I think he's a well-liked character with enough motivation to leave his museum and return if things go south, but it's always felt like his story concluded with Payday 2. And seeing as he's had no in-person live-action appearance, there isn't much of a tangible link to a possible return. I'm going to sit on the fence completely for this one, and give him a 50% chance of coming back. That leaves us with just 4 more characters to consider in the Heister category. These guys are generally ones who've had some staying power within the game and community. Up first, Clover, the first female character added, and one of the most anticipated Heisters post-launch. She's been around a long time and feels like she's played a sizable part in the story as a result of that. Aoife Duffin's voice acting work on the Diamond Heist trailer was incredible, and she has every chance of reprising that role if Overkill offers it to her. Just like Hoxton, in-game she's a bit of a career criminal who wouldn't be out of a job for long, so strikes me as one of the more likely additions outside of the originals. I'd give her about a 70% chance of coming back in Payday 3. Looking at the other female Heister we haven't discussed, Sydney is in a similar position. Sydney has a very minor role, to be honest, in the storyline, and is predominantly remembered for her unique visual flair and thick Aussie accent. She's another born Heister with a lot of ambition in the industry, and if we're being honest, she's the quintessential Payday waifu. Sydney strikes me as a bit of a no-brainer to bring back, but something tells me it won't be in the same capacity as you may expect. As a Heister or contractor, I'd still give her about a 75% chance of returning. Now for the boys. Dragon was one of the earlier characters to be added and has popped up a fair bit since. There was some sort of betrayal side story thrown out there at one point, and his actor, Dragomir Mrsic, has appeared in multiple live-action trailers as late as 2016 and appears to have a sustained relationship with the guys at Overkill. He's done fairly little from a media standpoint since Payday 2, but I wouldn't put it past him returning in Payday 3. We know his character had a close relationship with Mira Furlan's Butcher, and since their extremely sad passing in January means it's incredibly unlikely the Butcher will be returning, out of respect for her amazing performance as the character, it's very possible that Dragon will take on a similar role to hers in Payday 3. Overall, I'd give Dragon about a 60% chance of featuring in the game. Last but not least, we have Sokol, a very popular character after his addition in 2015, probably due to his unique look and laid-back style. I know very little about his voice actor, Alexei Manvalov, other than that he's still located in Stockholm and may be available for the role. I'm quite uncertain about this one, but he strikes me as very similar to Sydney in that the characters are intended to be young and ambitious and would be willing to join a reformed Payday gang in the new game. All things in balance, I'd give him about a 40% chance of coming back in Payday 3. With the Heisters out of the way, let's get into the more minor but still voiced Payday 2 characters, the Contractors and Suppliers. When I say supplier, I pretty much mean Gage, but I guess we do have Gao Feng to consider now as well. He's a really well voice acted character from the City of Gold campaign, but I anticipate he's going to be a Triad story exclusive and won't be coming back in the new game. Early days with this character, but I'd give him only a 5% chance of returning. Gage, on the other hand, has a genuine chance of making it back in. This guy's actually been an associate of the gang since the web series launched, and I've always been intrigued by his character. He's acted an amazing job to make him feel like a truly self-centered renegade who knew more than he was letting on. Unfortunately, his role in the story diminished over time, but he's still got all the qualifications to be a perfect arms dealer in Payday 3, potentially acting as a more immersive shop front. His rumours and stories entry is just plain odd, as it's stated that the Payday gang arranged for him to have some experimental surgery allowing him to walk again. But I think the idea of a wheelchair-bound gruff vet was a little more unique. Who knows what Overkill will decide to do with him in the end. A distinct possibility he will see a return though, probably around a 50% chance, depending on the addition of certain accommodating game mechanics. Sharon and the Continental should be somewhat obvious. If John Wick does make some sort of return, I can see the potential, but wouldn't say there is a high probability here. If Wick's a 35% chance, then Sharon's less than half that at 15%. Finally, we're on to the contractors of Payday 2 who didn't do the dirty on us, at least not yet. The Elephant and Vlad should probably be discussed alongside each other, as they both played very similar roles in the story and are synonymous with the supernatural elements that made up its culmination. If Overkill follow up with that route of storytelling, then I'd say both are sure to return, but I personally think the story will go other places in Payday 3, at least initially. In this case, having reminders of the Kataru craziness would probably not be ideal. As a result, even though the Elephant's actor, Bokeem Woodbine, has played a relatively active role in the live-action story, I don't see him coming back in Payday 3. At best, I'd give him about a 20% chance of reprising his role, but more likely, if he does come back, it'll be as a full-on antagonist this time around. Vlad, on the other hand, is a character very close to our hearts. Ilya Volok has created an iconic contractor who's been around since the early days. He's always played the role of a crazy who just knew that bit too much, and when all is said and done, he's a bit of a mastermind in his own right. I believe that Vlad's got a very good chance of coming back, and his final appearance in the last cutscene furthers that possibility. It has his trademark comical but ominous delivery, as he makes it clear to the gang that he knows exactly what's occurred with Bane. It's then that he claims he'll be retiring just like the gang, which gives him the perfect excuse to return once they do in Payday 3. We all know that Vlad's a king, but I don't think that stops him from fitting into a more grounded Payday game. He never really seemed to care for that supernatural stuff in the first place. Personally, I'd give him a 70% chance of coming back, odds increased by his recent return in the Silk Road campaign. On to the last major characters, and we have two of the most intriguing. First up, Locke. I think he'll be coming back, in fact I'm fairly confident of this. Ian Russell created the character in Locke that managed to essentially take over one of the most iconic roles in the game. Which is even crazier when you remember that Locke was originally designed to be a short-lived and villainous character. The South African accent and unique appearance helped him to stand out, and his quotability made him an instant fan favourite. All that aside, he basically has Bane's old role at this point, which is pretty much a necessary part in the Payday gang. I personally would like to see some more variety in contractor interaction within Payday 3, as we saw with Vlad butting in on Bullock's mansion, but that doesn't mean I don't think Locke should return. Ian's a credit to the community, who's made himself approachable to all, and pretty much single-handedly carried the voice acting work with the game since 2019. Locke must have had about 80% of the spoken lines of late, and we know Ian's more than willing to be a part of the next game. There's no way he doesn't come back with the old crew in some capacity, 90% chance in my eyes. And last but not least, the one many of you were probably wondering about, Bane. Isn't he dead? Well, yeah, sort of. In the bad ending he does pass away, but in the good and likely canon ending, he lives on, not as Bane, but as the President of the United States. So that means that Simon Vickland's version of Bane is probably gone, but not necessarily the character. In fact, I'm willing to say that I am certain that Bane's new presidential form will play a part in the story. The question you have to ask yourself is, why is Payday 3 taking place? Unless it is a separate group, which we strongly doubt, there must have been something to draw the crew out of retirement. I just don't see a world in which the gang have decided to take it upon themselves to start heisting again in New York and tearing into Bane's vision for a better America just for kicks. In my eyes, there's no way Bane is still a sitting president when the game starts, unless he's secretly contracting the gang himself for some reason. The entire purpose of the greatest heist was that Bane not only stole the gang their freedom, but America too. Like, what else is there for us to steal if Bane's still in power? This is why I was always guessing the game would take place outside of the US, but after seeing the first teaser image, we know that's very unlikely. In any case, no matter how I try to rationalize it, Bane has to exist and play a part in Payday 3 for its storyline to progress whatsoever. Even if it's just that he dies off screen, he must at least be mentioned for anything to make sense. I'd say I'm as sure of this as I am of Dallas's return, about 95 to 99% certain. And that does it. I know I missed some very minor characters, but do let me know if there's someone I missed that you think has a really good chance of coming back. Maybe Bobblehead Bob's going to be making his triumphant return as the leader of an opposition gang, or Mayor McKendrick is our new favourite heister. All joking aside, I really would be interested to hear what ideas you have and what you thought of my personal conclusions. Hopefully, I'll see you all very soon for the second part of this mini-series, where I'll be diving much deeper into my lore theories and story expectations for Payday 3. As ever, thank you very much to my Mean Infamy patrons and above. If you want to join that infamous club to see yourself in the credits or get early exclusive access to my videos, including the story videos, check out my Patreon link below. Remember that Discord is open to all if you crave some more Payday discussion. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you all very soon for the next one.